How are you guys all doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, bringing you guys another show to wrap up this week, Easter weekend, coming up to here, the big day in a few days. So here to wrap up the week with another round of great topics that I want to discuss on today's episode, leading off with both the UNC and Washington's Pro Days that happened yesterday. Drake May and Michael Penix throwing at both of those. So a lot of stuff to talk about with them being such highly touted quarterbacks. Later on, the wide receiver market is going to get a bit crazy. There's some pending extensions to be done for Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, coming up on their final years of their deals. Not to mention Brandon Ayuk, as well as a bunch of other wide receivers that need to figure out their situations. So I'm going to talk about that and how it could impact a lot of things with these teams, as well as giving you guys my over-under predictions and picks, really, after BetMGM dropped their win total probabilities for each NFL team. I'm going to be giving you guys my over-under picks on mostly all of the NFL teams. I picked only about a handful, I think about half, that I could only get to in the short amount of time. So that's coming later in the show. A lot of stuff to dive into and get to talk about. But before I dive into the first segment, please remember to always follow, like, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as if you have any questions or listening right now, to please use the tip and donations link at gsmcpodcast.net with any of your questions or comments that you want to make during the live shows. It makes it easy for me to read your question on air, answer it on air, and hopefully have a conversation, make it more engaging. It's a lot more fun for me that way, I think, and it's a big help for the show whenever you guys are able to use the tip and donations link. Again, is gsmcpodcast.net. We thank you guys always greatly every time you guys are able to do that. But that allows me to jump into the first segment, which has to do with the New York Giants and their head coach, Brian Daboll. Not the best season, obviously, for the Giants coming off of last year. It hasn't gotten much better with Saquon leaving, Xavier McKinney out the door now as well. You're kind of looking at all these pieces and not knowing what direction this team is going to go with. But fortunately for them, they have a very steady, very good coach in my opinion. I'm a fan of Brian Daboll. I like the way he goes about coaching this team and leading this team. But one thing he hasn't done over the past couple of seasons is call the plays for the offensive side of the ball, which he's more used to. That's what he knows. That's what he was hired to the New York Giants to come and do, improve this offense and develop their young quarterback, Daniel Jones. Of course, from his time spent in Buffalo as their offensive coordinator, the biggest reason for him getting hired in the New York Giants is the development and how successful Buffalo was with Josh Allen during his time there. In his time there with the Buffalo Bills, he made 3 consecutive playoff appearances, a conference championship game in 2020. He was an offensive coordinator for 8 seasons and spent 4 of them with the Bills. Then he came over to the New York Giants and hasn't been calling the plays for them, which is odd for some coaches, and in some instances you have some coaches that do call the plays, from Kyle Shanahan, Sean McDermott on the defensive side of the ball. Matt LaFleur calls the plays for Green Bay as well. So you have some players or some coaches in there, I should say, that do call the plays, that do make it a point of emphasis for them to get their ideas out there for their teams. And I thought Daboll did a very good job with Josh Allen. Obviously, you see where Josh Allen is now. And now I think he's starting to realize it as well with his latest comments that he made at the NFL owners meeting a few days ago. He said he was thinking about the possibility of trying to call plays now on offense and how that could be something of interest for him. Their current play caller and offensive coordinator is Mike Kafka, their primary play caller for the last 2 seasons, and he was just promoted to assistant head coach, so kind of more added to his plate. Maybe could have an opening now for Brian Daboll to go up to him and suggest, you might have a couple roles now. maybe let me, not maybe because he is the head coach, he could just go up to him and say that he's going to be calling plays, but it is something now to monitor with Mike Kafka having other responsibilities. He could alleviate the play calling duties to Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll seems to be open to it, seems to have an interest in it. At the owners' meeting, he said, "It's something I'm looking into. I think there are 20 head coaches at this point in time who call plays in the league. I've been doing a bunch of research. No decision has been made. I'm still going through the process, thinking about what we need to do." And it is interesting now because before, when it was reported that Brian Daboll was coming in and he was hired as the new head coach of the New York Giants, it was reported that their general manager, Joe Schoen, preferred that Brian Daboll didn't call the plays. That was a report that's out there. Those are, rumors, I guess you could say, that were out there. But it is interesting because Joe Schoen also came from the Buffalo Bills. And if I'm not mistaken, they did spend time there together. And he would know how prolific he is as an offensive coordinator. Now, if you want to say some of that is mostly due to Josh Allen being that great, making him look better, that could be an argument, but at the same time, Josh Allen didn't come in being this all-world quarterback right from the get-go like some of these other highly touted quarterbacks are. Like C.J. Stroud came in right away and made an impact right away. It wasn't like that for Josh Allen, and I think more people would agree that he had to develop a lot, learn how to use his skill set to the best of his abilities and to benefit the team mostly to get the best version of Josh Allen that we all see now. He's able to change and adapt and manipulate some things that he couldn't do before. That really all started with Brian Daboll. You kind of had the same build with Daniel Jones, which was a topic of conversation before. When Daboll came in, people were looking at Daniel Jones, and you could kind of see the resemblance there with Josh Allen. Not the arm talent or the arm strength, really, but the size, the frame of both of them. They're both very big guys, pretty athletic. Daniel Jones is pretty sneaky athletic for a lot of people that might not know how big he is, and in open field, he is pretty hard to tackle. So similar to Josh Allen, they have those similarities, but obviously the arm talent is there, and you saw some of the glimpses that could be with Brian Daboll and how this team could be exciting when they made the playoffs. They traveled to Minnesota. They beat Minnesota there. It didn't go for them. It didn't go well for them when they faced up against the Eagles, but that one game, it sort of cultivated everything that was supposed to be Brian Daboll, getting the best out of Daniel Jones. They looked great. Obviously, Saquon's there now. Now he's gone. You might have to change that up a little bit, but now you're at a point, you're lacking talent on offense. You still have Daniel Jones, who you have questions over. And Brian Daboll, I think if you're trying to make a decision now, I think it's worth a shot now because, what do you have to lose at this point? If things go really bad, and you have the same season or worse, you're going to be gone anyway. So what's the difference if you're calling plays or you're not calling plays? Or I should say, if you're not calling plays like last year, you wouldn't have the chance to experience something new with you calling plays to see if that changes the outcome in some way. Right now is the best chance to do that because of the connection to Allen and quarterback development. This could be the time, looking at the draft now a little bit, do you go for a younger quarterback? Talking about that development trait, that good relationship Daboll had with a young quarterback and bringing him in and developing him. Do you try to do that now and move on from Daniel Jones and have Daboll try to develop another guy? Because it worked out with Josh Allen, that's something to think about. They have been connected to almost all the quarterbacks, really, that have had their pro days recently. Drake May, Michael Penix is another one. J.J. McCarthy's a big one. They have shown a lot of interest in him and just their visits and meetings that they've had with him in and around their pro day. So that could be a scenario that intrigues the Giants now to try and get something out and create a spark on offense with a new young quarterback coming in is an avenue they could go down. And also, bringing something in could just change the aspect of this team. They're dynamic if you bring in a new quarterback and not really have Daniel Jones to worry about with his injuries, because that is a serious problem if your quarterback just keeps getting injured regardless of the O-line. I know the O-line hasn't been great, but it's still, some of it does have to do with Daniel Jones, and sometimes he doesn't make the best of decisions. He has fumbled before, so that's also something that he has to fix up. It's not just the offensive line. And just lastly, to wrap it all up, it seems like when you look at Brian Daboll, his demeanor on the sideline, his sort of character that he gives off, if you've seen him in interviews or just talking to other people, how he coaches his players, it seems like he's very determined on having everything go the right way. Everything's supposed to be like this. It's supposed to fit like this, be organized, and he just likes to have it all laid out. And by having it all laid out, it gives the team the best chance to win, in his opinion. That's how it seems from the outside looking in. When something doesn't go their way, when they mess up their own play, or it gets called on a false start, or a delayed game, or just a bad penalty on their end of the game, he almost loses it, because everything that they've planned, it's not organized, it looks sloppy. The way that he is in that way makes me think that play calling, it just has to be something he has to do, because giving those responsibilities off to somebody else, yeah, they could execute it as close as possible to your thinking, but it's not really the same. It doesn't translate the same coming out of your mouth to the quarterback as it does when somebody else is calling it. I think having that direct conversation with Daniel Jones, with the rest of the offense, to make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to line up, what the snap count is, and everything like that. It might not change them from, I don't even know their record, last year to a now 8-win, 9-win team, 10-win team, but it might look a little bit cleaner. It might look better, even if they don't win, because you obviously need a lot of talent to compete with all these quarterbacks. It might look better for him to extend his leave there with the Giants, which could just give him a bit of an avenue, a bit more wiggle room to try and convince everyone that they're building something. Because if it goes bad this season, again, like I mentioned, he's going to be gone most likely. Either him or Joe Shane are going to be gone if it looks bad again. So rather than have that, take the chance, take over the play calling duties, and see what happens. You never know. If you want to draft a quarterback, I'm not opposed to it because they sit at 6. If you get one at 6, I think you might as well go and try and get one. Even if he doesn't play right away, it's worth a shot to bring more excitement. But I think now is as good a chance as ever for Daboll and the Giants to take a chance with whatever they feel is the right choice to go with in this draft or in this offseason. It could save their jobs, and it could just keep them in New York a little bit longer. So that's where I stand on it. I'd love to know what you guys think on that, and if you're for or against Brian Daboll calling plays, especially if you're a Giants fan too, out there listening, let me know. But anyway, I will move on from this topic. There's a lot more to come on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast from the UNC Washington Pro Days that I'm going to react to. And I'm going to talk about how Michael Penix did and how Drake May both impressed yesterday. So that's coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the show to dive into the second segment of the show. But before I get into the UNC and Washington Pro Day, I forgot to mention the news that broke before I got here to the studio. I won't use the breaking news graphic I have because it's not really breaking news at this moment. It doesn't hit the same if I use it now with this news that broke a few hours ago. But Hassan Reddick was traded to the New York Jets from the Philadelphia Eagles for a third-round pick that could become a second-round pick. I'm guessing on playing time, but I wanted to mention that on here because it is pretty big because Hassan Reddick has been a topic on this show before, and where he would end up going, it was still a mystery. Now it's determined. I said it was going to happen before probably April 1st when he was due a roster bonus. So that gets done. The Jets and the Eagles essentially trade pass rushers. Bryce Huff went to the Eagles. Now Hassan Reddick goes to the New York Jets. So that's the biggest thing that happened. I forgot to mention that in the first segment, but I wanted to make sure to bring that up. But anyway, getting to UNC and the Washington Pro Days that happened yesterday, the biggest attractions were Drake May and Michael Penix for good reason. Starting with Washington's Pro Day, it was yesterday, like I mentioned. Rome Odunze is the other highly touted prospect that people would want to see, but he said that he wasn't going to do anything at their Pro Day because he did all the training and did all the workouts at the NFL Combine, so he chose to sit out yesterday. So it was really all about Michael Penix and how he threw, most of all, and how he tested athletically, because I think most people didn't expect him to run a 40 or broad jump or vertical jump, but he did it all. He did all three of those, unlike the other quarterbacks, the top 6 quarterbacks that didn't do a broad jump, a vertical jump, or much less ran the 40. Michael Penix did all of that, and very impressive results coming from that for Michael Penix. The official times, they're still out there because everyone's got a stopwatch. They don't have an official time for his 40, but it was impressive regardless because it fell between the 4.5 and 4.57 range for a quarterback at his pro day. To run a 40 at that speed, it's insane because I think I saw another wide receiver, I forget it, his name's not going to come to me right now, but another receiver ran a 4.52, and Michael Penix should just be in any sort of range close to a wide receiver in this year's draft is pretty ridiculous. So that already has caught all the attention of everybody that went to his pro day. Then he hit a 36.5-inch vertical and a 10'5" broad jump as well. All those measurements, all those results were better than all the quarterbacks that tested at the Combine. So those are athletic tests. Athletically, Michael Penix, you could say, it's up there for the most athletic quarterback just based on these results. It's very impressive seeing it because one of the biggest questions with Michael Penix was his multiple injuries that he's had. He's had a couple ACL injuries at Indiana, which, gives people cause to pause and look at him a little bit sideways, squint, and think maybe he's still carrying those injuries or that could become a problem. But with these results, it doesn't alleviate that concern that you have, but at least it gives you a reaction like, oh wow, those are great. Not only are they great, they're the best out of all the quarterbacks that tested at the Combine. So that's very impressive for him. Then on his 40 and all of his athletic tests, Michael Penix said, he reacted to it. He said, I'm a 4.4 guy, in my opinion. Some people had 4.46, some people had 4.5, but that's unofficial, so I'm good. I just showed I can run, so I feel good. That's what he said. Like I mentioned, his mobility and his lower half were some of the questions going into this whole draft process. But that was the athletic test, and he blew everyone out of the water. Throwing-wise, he threw about 60 passes at his pro day. He said, and a lot of reports said that he missed about 3 to 5 passes, give or take some. But he included a lot of intermediate, short routes, out routes, slants, go post routes, all that sort of stuff that coaches and scouts like to see at these pro days. The most impressive were obviously the deep balls because That's what he was known for, having a great arm, especially placement of the ball on these deep routes. That's what he was known for. He impressed a lot of people even more with those throws that he had at his pro day. And it all went pretty well for Michael Penix on the day. I'm sure he'll want a couple throws back. If you hear any interviews with him, he'll want a throw or two that he might have overthrown. The ball placement wasn't great, but I think overall the takeaways from this workout are the biggest thing has to be the athletic test, just because nobody expected him to test like that because of his history with injuries. And he comes out and shows everyone that athletically he could be the best one out of the quarterback class. He was teetering on first round, second round-ish. Some reports, I think coming from Jordan Schultz from Bleacher Report, said that one scout came up to him and said that Michael Penix has solidified his place in the first round with all these tests. That's really the main focus of the 40. If you have a crazy 40, regardless of what position you are, people are just going to rank you higher regardless, because that one test, really, it is how determinant it is, but the 40 on top of the broad jump, the vertical jump, and his arm talent, that was a report that I saw in making the notes for this. So that's interesting to see if some teams will trade up in the first round because they don't think they'll get him where they sit in the second round. That's another development to watch in this whole quarterback carousel that we have going on. And after his workout, he was seen talking to Brian Daboll and Joe Shane from the New York Giants. He told ESPN afterwards that he has visits scheduled with the Giants, the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Broncos, and interestingly enough, the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they didn't have already enough new quarterbacks in their room. That's who he's scheduled to visit with. Rounding it off with Rome Odunze as well. He didn't participate, like I mentioned, but he told ESPN also that after the combine and after he tested, the Giants actually also flew him out to New Jersey, to East Rutherford, and had a meeting with him, probably toured the facility as well, I would imagine. That was one thing before or after the combine, before his pro day. He has visits scheduled after the Washington Pro Day with Arizona, the New York Jets, and the Chicago Bears. Still holding that number 9 pick. He could be an option there. The Cardinals, I don't see them taking him at number 4, but you never know. The Jets also have the pick at 10. Could they get another playmaker for Aaron Rodgers? I'm sure Aaron Rodgers would love that. That's something else to monitor. But overall, the Washington Pro Day went excellent for both of these guys. And now, talking about the UNC Pro Day, Drake May as well, another one that hasn't really shown too much in this offseason for scouts or these NFL teams, and he really wanted to make a point out there to show off his arm and show that he can make every throw in the book. A lot of reports coming out after his pro day have said that everybody seemed to be impressed with his skill set that he displayed out there on the field. Bucky Brooks, actually, one of the analysts, I think he was there. If not, he was covering it from somewhere. He called him the prototypical quarterback that you would want in the league. If you were building a guy in Madden as a quarterback, you'd want him to look like Drake May, is what he's saying. 6'4", 233 pounds, I think it was. Pat McAfee as well chimed in. He said he's basically Andrew Luck 2.0. A lot of good praise, a lot of high praise for Drake May. He's young, which is the biggest concern that teams have, because he had a great season 2 years ago. Then last season, it kind of dipped off a little bit. The accuracy became a problem. And like I mentioned, he's still super young, so can he come in right away to a New England Patriots or a Washington Commanders and take over that franchise and be the franchise quarterback from day one? That still remains the biggest question, but at his pro day, he showed off really what people already sort of knew about him. His arm strength and his arm talent are off the charts. He had a lot of, again, similar throws to Michael Penix, intermediate, short routes, out routes, and stuff like that at different ranges of the field. There were some balls overthrown, some struggles with short and intermediate routes at the start, but he became more comfortable when he started throwing that deep ball, started spreading it out all over the field. That's when it all got good and it all sort of became impressive. the most impressive one I recall was when he threw a 60, 70-yard pass down the field to one of his receivers, right on the money, right in stride. That made all the highlights and headlines, so that is obviously a strong part of his game, the arm, the talent that he has. And after his workout, he said, Drake May he said, really, it was my first time working out for these teams. I wanted to give them, this is me, this is Drake May, and let it ride. After his workout, it was reported with some of the stories and reports that came out that he threw around 60 or actually 70 to 80 balls compared to the other pro days, which is about 10 or 20 more than some of these quarterbacks threw, which not only tells me that, he has a lot of juice in his arm to throw that many passes in one day and probably not be that tired. It's pretty impressive. A lot of people were left impressed with that, and Mike Garafolo reported afterwards that May will have a meeting with the New York Giants in the coming days as well. Not too much was made about other team meetings, but you could imagine that the Commanders will be in there, the Patriots can be in there. I know Drake May's spoken highly of the Patriots before, so I'm sure he has a visit planned for them there. New England, speaking about them, had 10 people there, 10 organization members there to watch Drake May at Chapel Hill. The Washington Commanders had head coach Dan Quinn there, general manager Adam Peters there, and their offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury there as well. And the Broncos had some people sprinkled in there as well. I think their general manager was present on the day to watch Drake May. So after both of these quarterbacks, the biggest takeaway before is with Drake May, I think people already knew what they were getting with the arm. I'm sure they saw some things that could be tweaked, but I don't think they saw anything that isn't coachable, isn't fixable with his technique or his throwing mechanics and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure everybody got confirmation that this is the sort of player that everybody envisioned, or at least I envisioned when I'm talking about Drake May and where I have him ranked. He did impress with those throws, so that's good. And just showing everybody for the first time, really, since college football ended, how impressive he is with these throws, and just sort of reminding everybody that it's not so cut and dry there at the top of your quarterback list. I'm still here. I can make all these throws. And his size does help as well, trying to determine that. Of course, situation and fits to these quarterbacks absolutely matter. You don't want them going somewhere where they can't really fit. And if that means Drake May isn't taken second overall to the Commanders, maybe has to sit behind Jacoby Brissett at number 3, that might seem weird, might not seem right to some people, but it is the best fit, and the best fit and situation is always the way to go with these young quarterbacks, and trying to get the most out of them. Fit, scheme, coaching, all that matters. Who you have around them matters the most. Same with Michael Penix. I wouldn't draft him personally before the Raiders or really around the Raiders, because I think first round grade that early, I think if you don't draft him there, if the Raiders sit there and he's still on the board, I think they could wait and draft somebody else, because nobody behind them is going to draft Michael Penix. No one's in dire need of drafting him, especially in the first round. None of those teams should be looking at Michael Penix after the Raiders to draft him in the first round. So they could get a bargain in the second round if then they want to trade up and move, depending on how they see the draft board falling. I think that would be a better investment for these teams looking at Michael Penix after they've been impressed with what they saw. I think that's the way to go with him and Drake May as well. But we'll see how it all plays out. We're getting closer and closer to the NFL draft. We're about a month away now, I think exactly, or a little bit less than a month. So I'm looking forward to that, looking to see how this all plays out. But in the meantime, that's all the time I'll have for that segment. There's a lot more to come, though, on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, the wide receiver market, as well as my over-under picks for the win totals provided by BetMGM later in the show. So a lot of good stuff coming up on today's episode. You're not going to want to miss all that stuff coming up next.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I'm going to get into the wide receiver market and how it's shaping up with some of the guys that are under contract, oddly enough. But before I do that, one last time, I want to remind you guys, if you have any comments, questions during today's live episode, to use the GSMCpodcast.net link, the tip and donations link with any of your questions. I'm able to see your question pop up right away if you use that link over here to my right in the chat box. It makes it better for me, makes it more fun engaging with you guys. I always appreciate you guys doing that. It's a big help for the show as well as all the other shows across the network. So again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Using that is a big help for us at GSMC, using that with any of your questions. But like I mentioned, talking about now the wide receiver market, and big money could be coming to this market and this position, probably the highest other paid position in the NFL, at least offensively, that's not a quarterback. You could argue pass rusher, but I think with these potential contracts coming in for these wide receivers, that could change, and it could be quarterback, wide receiver, pass rusher in terms of who's making the most money in the NFL. Looking at just the overall contract situations, a lot of the best wide receivers are on expiring deals or are approaching their fifth-year options. Some of those are Justin Jefferson. For now, will play the 2024 season on his fifth-year option deal that the Vikings picked up. You also have CeeDee Lamb on his fifth-year option as well this season. Ayuk is in on his fifth-year deal, fifth-year option as well in 2024. Amon-Ra St. Brown on the final year of his 4-year contract, no fifth-year option for him, as well as Jamar Chase, who is in the last year of his deal, but he still has that fifth-year option. Comments have been made about Jamar starting to have negotiations with the Bengals, but they have said that nothing's really been done as of yet. Those guys really round off the big picture of these big wide receivers that aren't available, but you're looking at them, you're keeping track of them over there in your side eye view, because they're going to want a lot of money. And with these teams that they're currently on right now, it hasn't been the smoothest of sailing, except for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think everybody else has had questions about where this is all going with their negotiations. Starting with Justin Jefferson on this topic, he finished last season with 68 receptions. He missed 7 games, but still had over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. Their general manager in Minnesota has said that they're not going to trade him. They were close to a contract extension at the start of 2023, but as Adam Schefter reported in that time, a $30 million per year offer was made to Justin Jefferson, but he turned that down. And that's pretty crazy to say, to report from Adam Schefter. But a lot of people now have started to think that you might have to offer Justin Jefferson a contract that makes him the highest paid player in the NFL other than any quarterback. That title currently is held by Nick Bosa, who's on a 5-year, $170 million deal with the 49ers. He's getting paid $34 million per year. So if Justin Jefferson is turning down a $30+ million offer per year already, you could imagine that they've offered him 31, 32 maybe, or 30 and a half to just pass Tyreek Hill, who currently is the highest paid wide receiver per year. you might have to do something like that because he has said he wants to reset the wide receiver market. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. You could argue he's the best wide receiver in the league with how talented he is. He might not have the speed of Tyreek, but he could do basically everything that any other wide receiver can do. And how important he's been for the Vikings. In all honesty, nobody would really realistically talk about the Vikings if it wasn't for Justin Jefferson, based on who's on their team right now. That's just a fact. He brings so much to their team. He makes them so much better when he's on the field. And you saw how much they missed him this past season. Are they willing to cough up that amount of money? It still has to be seen. Other things are going to have to be given up, but that's where he stands right now. They'd love to have a negotiation agreed upon before this season, before he gets the free agency next season, but that's where it all stands right now with Jefferson. No trade, according to their general manager, but it is something to keep an eye on. If they don't want to pay that money, will somebody else want to pay that money? It's something interesting to keep tabs on. Similarly, with CeeDee Lamb, he, unlike Justin Jefferson, probably had his healthiest season, his best season this past year, had 135 receptions, 1,749 yards, and 12 receiving touchdowns. The best statistical season for a Dallas Cowboy wide receiver. He led the NFL with those 135 receptions and was second and third in the NFL with the yards that he had and the touchdowns that he had. He made the first team All-Pro team, and he's also an otherworldly wide receiver that is up there toe-to-toe with some of the best in the game right now. Has a great production with the Dallas Cowboys. Again, how good would they be? How good would Dak have been last season, which was one of his best seasons? But if you took CeeDee Lamb out of it, how well and how much would that have impacted his performance? I would probably say a lot. He probably wouldn't be anywhere close to how good he performed if it wasn't for CeeDee Lamb. But that just shows how important he is. Probably the second most important player on that roster other than Micah Parsons. And he's going to be due up for an extension. So how they monitor that amount of money to who gets what, I'm sure CeeDee Lamb feels like he could at least get close to 30 or make $30 million per year. And if he wants that amount of money, how much is Micah going to want in a pass rushing market that's already pushing $30 million, $34 million with Bosa, like I mentioned? Most others make around $25 to $27 million per year. That's a lot of money allocated to just two positions. I get it that they're really great, some of the best in the league at their positions, but the Cowboys are already going to take a big cap hit with Dak's contract going into next year as well if he leaves. So they have some balancing to do with their checkbook with these three great wide players on their team. If I were to predict, I don't think they're going to be able to keep all three. One of them at least is going to have to go. I don't think it'll be CeeDee and Micah, just going back to the conversation I've had before. With Dak, it's looking like this could be his last year. If it means keeping Micah and CeeDee, I think, that's a pretty simple decision to take if you're the Cowboys. But nothing has really been moved on that aspect with CeeDee Lamb. Same with Amon-Ra St. Brown, a great season that he just had this year. 119 receptions, over 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns were all career highs for the wide receiver of the Detroit Lions. Earned All-Pro honors, and the Lions have met with his representatives at the NFL Combine about a new deal. Dan Campbell has said that he's wanted to sign not only Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Jared Goff before the 2024 season. So that's positive. At least the Lions are moving in that direction. And they haven't had too many moves in free agency so far. So you could take that as a sign that they're planning already a certain amount of money that they want to have saved up to make sure they sign Amon-Ra and Jared Goff. It's not like we've heard negative things coming out of them. So out of all the wide receivers, I think that deal is the closest at getting done, and I expect it to be done before the season starts, before we get into training camp and all that sort of stuff. Moving on to Brandon Ayuk. probably one of the more negative ones to talk about. He's coming off another great season as well. All these receivers are some of the top in the league. He had 75 receptions, over 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns, had a record, broke Jerry Rice's record with the 49ers of having 7 games with 100 yards receiving in those games in a single season. No one's done that since Jerry Rice, and Ayuk just did that. He's turned into their most reliable pass-catching option. Debo is all over the place. You could use him anywhere. Just in terms of passes caught and being a receiver, being a threat at that position, I think Ayuk surpassed him a little bit, and Debo already signed a 3-year, $71.5 million deal. Ayuk might want more than that just because of how great he's done receiver-wise, and he led the 49ers in targets the last 2 seasons. He has put up similar numbers to CeeDee, Amon-Ra St. Brown, so if you're him, why wouldn't you make a lot of money like they would? And John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have said that they want to get this extension done, but Ayuk has given off the different vibe and has said that, they're not really in a place yet where he agrees on the value. And if I were to say a receiver to move on this season, it would probably be him. I don't think, at this point, if it's all still so negative, I just don't see a deal getting done. I don't know where he'll end up, but it just doesn't seem like the 49ers are ready to commit a lot of money to him, especially if they've said that they want to pay Brock Purdy a lot of money, like I talked about yesterday, or a few days ago. So that's something they have to figure out, and that's where Ayuk stands. Jamar Chase is another one. Healthiest season just this past year. 100 receptions, 7 touchdowns. You don't really have a rush with him because next offseason he'll have a 5th-year option, so it'll be his last year, but people will speculate about it. Joe Burrow already got paid. They're reluctant to give T. Higgins a contract right now, which could suggest that they know they're going to have to pay Jamar a lot of money. So on his side of it, it could be positive in that way. If they don't pay T. Higgins, of course you don't want to lose a teammate, but if you're just strictly talking about Jamar Chase, making sure he gets as much money as possible, it could be a better sign if T. Higgins is on a different team. He doesn't get paid with the Bengals. He gets a lot of money elsewhere. That way the Bengals are ensuring themselves to keeping Jamar Chase by having a lot of money saved up. Their executive vice president, Katie Blackburn, has said that they're going to study up on what happens with all these other receivers. So they're fortunate in that way to kind of see the landscape play out a little bit. But regardless, they're going to have to pay in that ball range as well. So no real rush with him, but just keep him in the back of your mind. He is coming up as well. And then you have other receivers, like I mentioned. T. Higgins, he was franchise tagged. He's requested a trade. He wants what he feels he deserves, but we'll see if the Bengals actually trade him. They don't have to, but if teams out there are really interested, build up the assets to trade him, that could be something to monitor as well. And Nico Collins as well is reportedly interested in an extension as well. You saw how well he played for the Houston Texans, how great of a connection he developed with C.J. Stroud. That's another one to watch. He's in the last year of his deal coming up, so seeing how well he performs this year, if they perform to the level I think they will, I expect him to make a lot of money next year. So those are all the receivers and how it's all sort of following up right now. A lot of them stand in a gray area. Nothing's really moving for Justin Jefferson right now, at least in the public eye, but you don't think these receivers will move too much because of how great they are, but you never know. In the NFL, one of these guys could honestly be traded during the draft, and you could see one of these A.J. Brown situations if it doesn't work out. Ayuk could be the most likely candidate for that if I were to pick one as well. Like I mentioned, I don't think he'll get an extension done, but it's definitely interesting to see, break it down, how all the money works out for these teams. Something I'm sure I'm going to touch on later on this offseason or into the season. But for now, I will put a pin in that and transition into the last segment of the show, not before I go to the last break of the show. And on the other side, I'll bring you my over-under picks for the win totals for about half of the NFL teams in the league after BetMGM dropped their predictions as well. So that's coming up shortly after this last break of the show. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you for joining me on the last segment of the show here today. Giving you guys my over-under predictions. BetMGM dropped their win probability totals for a lot or all the NFL teams this coming season. The Chiefs, the Ravens, and the 49ers were all tied for the highest win projections at 11.5 wins this coming season. The 49ers are also the betting favorites as of now to win the Super Bowl, for obvious reasons. The lowest win projections from BetMGM were the Panthers at 4.5, followed by the Broncos at 5.5, and the New England Patriots as well at 5.5. So I won't touch on those teams in this segment just because I wanted to keep it focused on contenders, people or teams, I should say, that improve the most. And I'm making my predictions based on the team they have right now. A lot of these teams could draft quarterbacks. They could have Caleb Williams on their team. A team could have J.J. McCarthy. Some trades could be made. But to keep it simpler, to make sure it's certain, and I'm not thinking, if they get this player or what happens if they get this player. We're talking about the rosters that they have today on March 29th, Friday. So that's how I made these projections. The first team I want to go over is the Atlanta Falcons. I had them at under 9.5 wins. Their projection is 9.5 this coming season. They finished 7-10 last year, and their opponents this year are the Dallas Cowboys, the Giants, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Steelers at home, as well as all their divisional opponents. And on the road, they're going to travel to Washington, Denver, the Eagles, the Raiders, and the Minnesota Vikings. With Kirk Cousins, I think it adds a lot. To go from 7 wins to 10 wins, I think is doable, which is why I had to change it to over. I had them at under 9.5, but thinking about it more and more, how much better people don't understand that their offense is going to be with Kirk Cousins there. Even if he's not the player he used to be, it's going to be such a monumental jump from a Ritter, a Mariota that they have. And we're only talking about 3 more wins. They're going to be 10. They could be 10-7. That's over. And I think that's probably where most people have them falling in the rankings. So I'm going over for the Atlanta Falcons, 9.5 wins. They're going to get more. The Baltimore Ravens, like I mentioned, they were set at 11.5. They finished 13-4 last season. Very impressive, very talented roster that they have. Now they lost a lot of those pieces. They lost specifically a lot on defense. Geno Stone's gone. Almost all their offensive line is gone. Their starters from last year. Moses is gone. Zeitler's gone. John Simpson is gone. He also went to the Jets. So you only have 2 returning guys on that offensive line. You lost Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, like I mentioned. So where does that leave them? They haven't really replaced all of them. They added Derrick Henry, which is great. But we're talking about getting 12 wins next year. And they're playing in a very tough division already. Plus, they got the Broncos, which is winnable at home. The Raiders is winnable. The Eagles at home, I don't think they'll beat them. They have the Commanders, which I'm sure they'll beat. The Buffalo Bills at home, I'm sure, again, they'll win. But on the road, they go to the Chiefs, the Chargers. They'll probably win. The Cowboys, they'll probably win. The Giants, they could win. Then they have Houston and Tampa Bay. So then you have Joe Burrow coming back in Cincinnati. The Browns are great defensively. The Ravens always split one with the Steelers. So to get over and make 12 wins with the big losses that they have, I think they'll go under 11.5 wins, 11 wins, potentially at most for me. But I just think those pieces that they lost are very significant. I don't see them getting over 11.5 wins this season. Now, moving on to the Buffalo Bills, another team similar to the Ravens. They lost a lot. Players that I think people don't understand how significant they were to their identity and how their team is built up. They're projected at 10.5 wins. They finished 11-6 last year with winning, I think, their last 5 or 6 in a row. So they were already teetering on that 11th, 10th win, and I think they only got worse. So to project them at 10.5, I think I'm going to have to go under, seeing them as a 10-7, 9-8 team for me this season because they haven't really replaced the players that they have. The Jets have gotten better. The Dolphins have gotten almost better. They're just still really good. So that's something to monitor. Tough division. I think they're going to go under 10.5. The Bears, I know they don't have Caleb Williams, but they have the first pick in the whole draft. So I'm going to say that Caleb Williams is on their team already. And projecting them at 8.5 wins is what BetMGM has them at. Caleb Williams, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift are all going to be added or already on the team for the Chicago Bears. Last year they finished 7-10, and they got significantly better. They were able to keep Jalen Johnson, their top corner, making sure he sticks around to shore up that defense. They're going to get so much better again on offense that projecting them at 8.5 wins when last year they had 7, and they don't play that too many hard teams. They play the Panthers at home, the Jaguars at home. Their toughest team at home might be the Packers in their own division or the Lions, because then they have the Rams, the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Titans, and on the road, their toughest 2 teams are Houston, which I could see being sneaky close. Then you have the Niners, which is hard. The Cardinals on the road, the Colts on the road, and the Commanders on the road. All those games are going to be very close, and they're going to have a chance to win. So I think they could get 2 more wins out of all those games. Give me the Bears going over their 8.5. That might surprise some people, but I think they're going to go over with Caleb and the additions that they made. The Bengals set at 10.5. I think we're going to go over because they were 9-8 last year already, like I mentioned, with the Ravens. Tough division. They got some gritty wins in those games, and their schedule right now doesn't have the toughest teams on there. Away, they have the Cowboys, which they can beat on the road. The Chiefs is going to be hard, but they've done it before. The Giants, the Panthers, the Titans, all those are on the road. And then at home, they only really play better at home, and they don't have a lot of tough out-of-division teams coming in there. The best one is the Eagles. They could beat the Eagles. So give me the Bengals going over 10.5 for this upcoming season. The Browns, a similar one. They're 11-6. Haven't really lost anybody. Haven't, changed much about their team. Kevin Stefanski's still there. They're projected at 8.5 wins, which is crazy. If you're a betting person out there, 8.5 I think is way too low for the Cleveland Browns. No faith in anything that they did last season. Give me the over for the Cleveland Browns. 8.5 is crazy for the Cleveland Browns. They're very good. Moving swiftly along, the Dallas Cowboys, 10.5 wins. I haven't been high on them all year. They got 12 wins last year. They're projected at 10.5. They lost too many people to make themselves think that they're better. I'm taking the under for the Dallas Cowboys. Going on to the Detroit Lions, they're set at 10.5 wins as well. They were 12-5 last year. In a tough division where they're near the top, if not the best team in that division, 10.5, I don't see it as a stretch to go over with how their schedule plays out. Their toughest road game is the 49ers or the Packers in their division. And out of division home game, that's their biggest challenge. Probably, I don't even know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I guess. And they beat them last year, so I'm taking the over at 10.5 for the Lions. Sticking in that division, the Green Bay Packers, they're set at 9.5 wins. They were 9-8 last season already, and they arguably got better, a lot better, because you saw how great Jordan Love is and how well he went toe-to-toe with the 49ers, who are the best team in that conference. Setting them at 9.5 is very low, so I'm going to take the over. I'm taking over 9.5 wins for the Packers. They're a sneaky good team in the NFC that I think are going to make a deep playoff run. I'm not locking in an NFC Championship game, but they were just a few steps away from that, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're right in the mix again. Over 9.5 for the Packers. The Texans I'm really high on because I said before that they had the best offseason. Their team has just gotten better. With some of the players that they lost, they've either improved or stayed the same at those positions. With a rookie quarterback last year and a lot of unproven players that you didn't know how they were going to turn out, they still finished 10-7. They have some difficult games. I will give it that. They have the Bills at home, the Dolphins, the Ravens at home, the Lions at home. But their road games aren't really tough out of division. The Jets, I'm sure they could beat or make it a contest. They have the Chiefs, the Packers, and the Vikings, which are going to be close, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won. I've been on the bandwagon a lot this offseason for the Texans, so setting them at 9.5, I'm taking the over clearly. They finished 10-7 last year. I'm taking over 9.5 wins. There's no way they get worse by making their team better. Moving on to the Chiefs, they're set at 11.5. They finished 11-6 last year with their worst team, a lot of people were saying. So if they got 11 wins last year, they're only going to get better. I'm taking the over at 11.5 wins for the Chiefs. That's a no-brainer. The New York Jets now, they're set at 9.5, and they've gotten a lot better as well. They finished 7-10 last year, which surprised me a little bit because I thought they were worse with how bad they played in some of these games. So to get 7 wins last year and improve the offensive line, get another playmaker for Aaron Rodgers, you have the 10th pick in the draft. Use that to get better offensively as well. Maybe improve the O-line a little bit more. Pass rusher is still in need. Well, I guess they got Hassan Reddick, but secondary is still in need. 9.5, I think it's all or nothing this year for the Jets, so I'm taking them over 9.5. It has to be this season or else it's never going to happen. So I'm taking the over for the Jets. And rounding it off here with the last few teams, the Eagles, they're set at 10.5. They got 11 wins last year, and they got significantly better on offense. Defense, you could still have questions about, but because I think they're so much better than everybody in their division, with how bad the Cowboys got and how many players they lost, I think they could sweep that entire division, realistically, because their defense is questionable, but they still have Darius Slay. You know, they got CJ back. Devin White's there. I think that's very underrated signing that they had. They have the D-line still. Offensively, they have so much talent. You couldn't really make a solid argument that a team in that division is better than the Eagles. So if they sweep that division, that's 6 wins right there, plus how the rest of their schedule plays out. Not that many teams better than them on their schedule. Give me the Eagles over 10.5. The Steelers now, come on now. Setting the Steelers at 7.5 is crazy. It's crazy with how many players they got into their team now, how they switched the quarterback room all over. They got 10 wins last year and made the playoffs with as bad as it's probably going to get offensively. Setting them at 7.5 is crazy. I'm taking the over, no question. Regardless if I'm a fan or not, 7.5 is crazy. I think that's the lowest one on here. Yeah, that's the lowest one on here. At 7.5, I'm taking them over all day. And the last team I will mention is the Los Angeles Chargers. They were set at 8.5, which will surprise a lot of people. But, well, it would surprise a lot of people. No, but because I just don't see them being there. Talent-wise, they have the 5th pick, but other than that, I don't think they'll get that much better. I love Jim Harbaugh. I love that they're going to really invest in this project. But to jump from 5-12 last season to over 8.5 wins, I don't really see that happening. I think they'll jump to 8 wins max, 7 wins, and still play a little bit better and keep Jim Harbaugh around. I'm sure that's the best way to go. So I'm going to go under for the Los Angeles Chargers. 8.5, I think it's just a little bit too high for them, and that's where I see them playing out. That's all the teams I had on there to talk about. Some serious contenders, teams that are going to be talked about for the majority of this season. So that's where I have them. Let me know if you disagree, agree, hate one of the picks I made. I'd love to hear it all in the comment section or in the live chat box as well. But those were the picks I made. Again, let me know what you guys think. And in saying that, I will conclude that episode there and conclude the week there. Again, to wrap up this episode, I want to thank you guys immensely for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to also follow the network on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X for more of the network's content on all social media platforms. If you want to see more of me and this show's content, please check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel for YouTube Shorts that are posted every weekday. All the live, full recorded short shows that are on there that I've recorded in the past, they're all on there if you want to go watch past entire shows, as well as individual segment videos that are on there, recorded on there as well. If you want to rewatch a specific segment or catch up on one that you missed, they're all on there on both channels. Tune in every weekday, as always, at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions, conversations, and NFL storylines with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys again for joining me this week. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys back here again on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.